know a few now, which is great. Thank you for coming. I'm Mark Lyford, and I'm going to tell you a bit about my story and my up and down of life and being an entrepreneur. So a little bit about me. I live in Moira. I've been in Ashby off and on for the last 20 odd years. I've got two children, 20, 24, two boys, and I have a few hundred racing pigeons, 4 dogs and a parrot. And that's me in a brief nutshell. You'll learn a lot more about me shortly. But yeah, in the early days, I was lucky enough to go to private school. Not that my academic abilities suited private school, because they didn't, but my dad was insistent that I should go, and it taught me a lot. It taught me discipline. It taught me that I am terrible at rugby and any sport, really. But what it did do is show me the other side of life. My parents are very working class, normal people from Leicestershire. And I saw a whole other side of life. I saw, whereas my dad had turned up to pick me up from school in his Datsun 120Y car, which at the time was embarrassing, but now you look back as strengthening. And everybody else was being picked up in Mercedes and BMWs. That was a contrast, let's say. So I didn't do very well at school, left school with a GCSE in cooking, which, considering all the money my mum and dad had thrown at the school in, wasn't great from an academic point of view, but I do believe it instilled a work ethic and something deep down to aspire to try and do what I could do. And certainly the discipline of work and having to work, do your homework before you even left school, all of that stuff certainly did something for me. About the age of 13, my very first business involved one of these. Does anybody know what that is? That's a Scion organizer. These were things years ago were cutting edge, believe it or not. And all of my posh mates at school had got these. And I found a book. I'd managed to get one of these, and I found a book how to program little programs for this. I mean, in retrospect, they were terrible programs, but I found a book with loads of programs that you could manually code programs to make them work. And these things had little flash drive memory cards in them. So I made these programs until all hours and then sold them to all my mates for £1 and £2 each. That was my very first business. It kind of went sideways when somebody found out about the book that I'd got, but that's how I started. That was my first endeavor. But really, my first entrepreneurial journey started at the age of 18 years old. I left school, and my very first business was proper business, as I would class it, was buying and selling racing pigeons. I lived not far from one of at the time, the world's most famous racing pigeon studs at Hall Farm Charlie, where the Mazzarellas own. And that's what I was doing. I was buying and selling them. I sent pigeons all around the world, including Japan, America, everywhere. That was my very first business. And one of the big ideas I had was to set up a big pigeon race, a money pigeon race. This was when I was 18 years old. And somehow or another, through the course of trying to find people to help me do this, I got on the radar of a Nigerian scammer. So I'm 17 years old, and a wealthy divorcee contacted me saying that she was interested in what I was doing, and 6 months of a call every single day ended up that my mum and dad had to take my passport off me to stop me from going to Lagos, Nigeria to tie up the deal. That's how naive I was. But bear in mind, this wasn't the thing like it is now. The Nigerian scams are massive. This was many years ago. This was 32 years ago. Now, during the course of my real estate wannabe Nigerian,
what were they offering?
they were offering to invest in my business, which was the race, the big race, in exchange for me finding them property. I mean, I could laugh at myself all night now when I talk about it, but they called me every day. It was unbelievable. Now, during the course of me trying to find real estate for my Nigerian friend to buy, I got a hold of a magazine called the International Real Estate Directory. And I faxed, this is how long ago it was, I faxed tens, if not over 100, of real estate agents all around the world saying, I've got a client that's interested in purchasing property, please let me know what you've got. And one of them people that I faxed was a man called Harry Dan. And Harry Dan lived in Freeport in the Bahamas on Grand Bahama Island. And the next day he called me and he said, he listened to me out about the big investor and he said, listen, I get one of these messages every single week. Ignore it, it's a scam. No, this is the real deal. This is the real deal. And he told me that it was a scam. When he said he was English and he'd been over there for 30 years and he lived on the island 20 minutes away from the coast of Florida, I thought, that sounds all right. I like that. I like the sound of this. And I pestered that man week in, week out. By this time, fast forward 6 months, the Nigerian had gone away. They knew there was no money in it because I hadn't got any money. Why they even approached me, I don't know. But by now, I'm speaking to Harry every single week. And I bugged him that much. He said, if you're that bloody interested in the Bahamas, put yourself on a flight and come over and I'll put you up. 8 weeks later, I was there. I'd saved up the money and I was there. And it blew my mind. I'd been to America once before on my own at 17, but at the age of 18, I flew over there and I met him. He picked me up from the airport and we went out for dinner and it blew my mind what another world it was. And then on to that, I went over to see him 3 or 4 times every year. I didn't used to sit on the beaches. He was a real estate broker. He had been in business for 30 years there. And I used to sit in his office listening to him, learning, watching him interact with clients and people. And that was my very first start to see what real business was. And I had the bright idea of setting up a international real estate website. I said to Harry, why don't we get you online? This was way back. So this is 1995, 6 time. So I tried to do that. And after about 6 months of trying, he said, look, stop messing around trying to do this. It's clearly not working. There's only one thing that's making any money online. We'll come back to that in a minute. So the Bahamas for me was an eye-opener. And I was still, I'd gone past my Nigerian friend and I was still pursuing the idea of setting up a really big pigeon race. For people that don't know about pigeons, it's a massive sport. It's declining heavily in the UK, around the world, in a conventional sense. But so people racing pigeons into their own back gardens is declining. But races where you send away your baby pigeons to, say, for instance, Portugal, and they race for money, that's increasing at a massive rate. And I had the idea 30 odd years ago that I wanted to do this in the Bahamas. So I told Harry about this, and he said, I know somebody you should speak to. Because I said, I need to find a way of, if I can get this up and running, getting the pigeons from the island that he was on, which was the very northerly island of the Bahamas, all the way down to another island so they can fly back for the race. And he said, I know who I'll get in touch with. And he gets on the phone and he calls Sir Freddie Laker. Who knows who Sir Freddie Laker is? Yeah, so Sir Freddie Laker was responsible for budget airlines as we know it. He took on British Airways and he set up budget airlines as we know them. There would be no Ryanair, there'd be no EasyJet if it wasn't for Sir Freddie Laker. So this was one Thursday afternoon. He's called about lunchtime. Sir Freddie, I've got a guy I want you to meet. 45 minutes later, I'm on a Laker Airlines flight from the Bahamas flying into Fort Lauderdale to meet Sir Freddie Laker. I go through the airport and there's Sir Freddie in his Rolls Royce picking me up personally so I can speak to him to pitch him the idea of running a pigeon race in the Bahamas. Sir Freddie used to live on the same island, so that's how Harry knew him. And he agreed to do it. He agreed to do it. It was a mind-blowing experience in many ways. Now, the race didn't happen for various reasons. It was just way too early. As I'll talk about timing in a little while. Timing's critical. The race didn't work out. But those experiences and being with Harry was a pivotal moment in my life. So the real change happened around 1996. And Harry said to me, look, so he was my mentor, he was a friend. As I said, I used to spend 2 weeks at a time, 3 or 4 times a year. And I learned a lot from him. And the big change happened when Harry told me, look, there's only one thing that makes any money on the internet at the moment. Stop messing around trying to do these things that you're doing. The only thing that makes any money is porn. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to carry on with the property. And then about another 6 months later, I thought, yeah, this is not working out. I need to look at this. And I did. And by this time, I'm living with my girlfriend at the time. I'm living in Leicester. I'm driving a Swift taxi at night to pay the bills. And I'm trying to make this thing work. I knew deep down there was something in it, but I just couldn't find the secret key, as it were, to it. My girlfriend then became my fiance. Things weren't particularly great. She was a bit peed off with how much I was working. I proposed, she said yes. But then 2 weeks later, she left me. But I'd made a promise to her. This is probably why she left me, to be fair. I'd made a promise that I was going to give it another 3 months to try and make this thing work, and if not, I was going to do something else. And I broke that promise. But interestingly, she left about 3.5 months into that promise. And prior to going away with her for a week, I put 4 sites up on this network, this adult network. It was an age verification network, actually. And I put 4 sites up, and I came back from holiday, and they'd made me $438. And all I'd done is put the sites up. So I've come back and I thought, well, if I put 20 up there, will that pay all my bills and mean I have to drive a taxi anymore? Sure enough, I put 20 up there, and that's what happened. And that was the thing that life changed. This particular phase of my life changed. So Lisa had left, but I'd gone from about 10 grand in credit card debt, debts this and hassle and stress, living in this flat in Burstall in Leicester. And I'd put 20 sites up really quickly, and I was making over $2,000 a month. Now, it depends what people's moral compass are. To me, everything was legal and licensed. It was completely normal pornography, and it was making money. It was the first time anything I'd done. For all the effort and the months and the years of trying, that's what happened. So, 18 months later, thanks to Harry, I'd gone from having 4 sites sitting in a flat in Leicester, and I'd figured a way out of scaling this business to where 18 months later I had 32,000 sites. And life changed beyond belief. This is about the time, Dina, when you first, you didn't know us then, but you'll know us later on in the chapter. And it was some weird and mind-blowing times. I've told you about Sir Freddie Laker. Another story that I remember is in Las Vegas, in a limousine, sitting next to Ron Jeremy. Who knows who Ron Jeremy is? Ron Jeremy is one of the most famous adult male porn stars there is. So I'm sitting next to Ron Jeremy. I know you do. I'm sitting next to Ron Jeremy in a limousine in Las Vegas, driving to a party at Liberace's house. I mean, how more random does it get? But these are one of the experiences that I had. So life was good. I was in the UK. I'd I'd got a new girlfriend, and I was doing really well. And for years, I'd had the idea of moving to the Bahamas. So I moved. I moved to the island. Now, sadly for me, I only moved in early 2001. But unfortunately for me, Harry, I had a call in July 1999 from Harry saying I've got lung cancer. And I'd met him just the month before. And unfortunately, that took his life Millennium Eve, 1999. And I regret now, still to this day, that I never managed to get to the Bahamas while he was still alive. I still think about him all the time. He was a man responsible, or helped certainly guide me in the right direction to get where I was, but he wasn't there for me to share it with him. So we moved to the Bahamas, and we had a great life. Life was pretty damn good. You'll know that photo, or that person in that photo, a much younger version of the person in there, Dina. Life was great. I used to fly from the Bahamas on a Monday morning to Florida on a Thursday night. I used to fly on a Monday morning to Florida and fly back on a Thursday night. Life was really good, and I was making a lot of money. I was making 150 grand a month, dollars. But being 24 years old and having a ambition, that wasn't, for some stupid reason, good enough for me. Making over 2 million a year back then wasn't good enough, because the guy above me was making $1 million a week. So in my head, well, it's only fair that I try and make $1 million a month, and that's what I tried to do. Now, I had many opportunities to diversify my business when I was making this money, but I didn't. Critically, I didn't. I could have gone into property. I didn't, because every dollar that I put back into the business doubled. I made my money back and doubled it within 6 months. So I kept putting it in. Big mistake. And it's down to having eggs in baskets. Having all your eggs in one basket is a road to nowhere. Diversifying is the key. I'd had an idea that, so I was doing all of those sites and there was no video. It was all images. Broadband was not really a thing, and I knew it was coming. And I decided I was going to set up a similar system ready for video. I spent a year doing it, spent way too much money developing it, and I was ready to launch. But when I launched, all hell broke loose. I got lawsuits within 3 days of launching it. I got lawsuits from the company that I used to work with on 3 different continents, and it was a nightmare. I had to fly over to Los Angeles to have a meeting with the owner of the company. I went to the meeting room. There was 2 bodyguards on the door who patted me down for recording devices. It was heavy stuff. I thought, if I've got 4 recording devices on me, I'll get away with 1. I got away with none. That's how bad it was. So everything starts falling apart. The trouble with ambition is, especially ambition at a young age when you haven't got the experience, I wanted, no matter what, to go to that next level. And if I'd have just, when things started going wrong, if I'd have just took count of myself and said, if this does go wrong, go and do something else. But I kept fighting, and I kept fighting, and I kept fighting. And I came back to the UK, tail between my legs, because the Bahamas is not a place you want to live if you're on your uppers. So I'd gone from this great life to being back in the UK, which was great. We moved back to Ashby. But the naive kid, really, at 24 I was back then, thought, I am, no matter what, making this new system work. And I went from having all this money to being 250 grand in debt, keeping going, no matter what. I've got a team of people, we're going to keep going. And in 2004, that ended up in me going bankrupt, which at the time was the worst thing ever that could happen to me. The shame, it was horrible. So I'd gone from 5 years before, having a great life, the life I wanted. I can remember one day about in May 2000, about May 2000, driving down the freeway in Fort Lauderdale, going back home, and there was a big freeway sweeping to the left towards the airport, and I tapped the dash of the car I'd got, thinking, and I said to myself out loud, "You've made it. You've made it. You've done what you want to do. You're where you want to be. You've got what you want to go." Fast forward 5 years, I'm facing bankruptcy. I went through bankruptcy, and it was hard times. Naivety, lack of experience, you name it, I'd had it. So then in July 2006, my wife, we'd got 2 children by then. My wife unfortunately announced she was leaving, and it crushed me. By saying it was a horrible part of my life. And so then you say, well, things can't get any worse. Yeah, don't say that. It can only get better. Well, I've learned not to say that anymore. Because July, I thought, this is genuinely the worst part of my life ever. The money and all of that didn't matter. That particular month crushed me. But desperate people do desperate things in desperate times. And I'd got this debt. Some of it was owed to the bank. I didn't particularly care about that. But a lot of it was owed. I'd been bankrupt, but morally I still owed friends and family and people money. And how am I going to pay this off? And you get to a point where you think, I really don't know what to do, because nothing I'd touched worked since this all went wrong. So what would you do? You're in 250 grand of moral debt. You want to get it paid off. What would you do? Not for 250 grand with no equity, you wouldn't. No. Well, here's one thing not to do. Don't rent a warehouse in Leicester and grow 250 plants in it. That's what I did. Somebody I knew at the time said I know how to grow it. I tried a few. I tried growing it, and weirdly, it was the first thing I'd been any good at in years. And I thought to myself, if I can just do 3 of these grows, I can pay all my debts off and I can start again. Legally. Yeah, I know. He's the only one that owns the license to do that as well, which. Yeah. So, I'd borrowed money to get that going. And August 2006 was a particularly warm summer. And what a lot of people don't know about these plants, and whatever your views are on cannabis, I think it should be legalized. I think one of the most conservative Western civilizations in the US, i.e. the US, are legalizing it. And if they're legalizing it, I don't see why we're not. But again, that's down to people's moral compass. I've never had another drug in my life, no interest in having anything other, but I have had this. And during these times I was describing, trust me, I relied on it a little bit too heavily. What I was going to say is people don't realize that if these plants this is not an educational talk, but if these plants get too warm, it can make it all go wrong, the same as if they get too cold. So we had to bring air conditioning units in. Can you see what's coming? So, August 2006, it was a Monday morning, I get a phone call. Mark, yes, this is PC, whoever. One of the air conditioning units caught fire the day before. The sprinkler system came on. I didn't even know the bloody sprinkler system worked. Everything was flooded, and I'm arrested. First time I've ever been in trouble in my life before. A horrible experience. And bear in mind, it was only 5 weeks since my wife left. I am at bad times here. And if you've never been on bail before, please bail. it's horrible in itself. It's kind of a sentence in itself, and it was a long 14 months. I was on bail for 14 months. My life was on hold. I didn't know what I was doing, what was going on, nothing. And then October 2007 comes. And my solicitor said, you're looking at getting 2 to 2.5 years. There's a small chance you're not going to go down. I knew I was going down.
But that accounted the 14 months as part of it.
No.
No.
You're looking at getting 2 to 2.5 years, she said. The judge gave me 4 years. Now, how can that be right? When the day I got arrested, the maximum guidelines was 6 years, which comes down to 4 years after a guilty plea. This guy gave me, sorry, I said that wrong. The maximum guideline was 4 years, which comes down to 2.5 the day I got arrested. But there was a proliferation of these farms coming up at the time, so they put the sentencing guidelines up to 6 years. That can't be fair in my mind, but anyway, the judge gave me 4 years, and I was done. Because 4 years is 2 years in prison. And it was a really hard 2 years. I'd never been in trouble in my life before. I went to Doncaster prison, which is a hellhole of a place. I was lucky I only had to spend 3 weeks in Doncaster, which is a category B prison. I then got moved to another prison up near York. That was a little bit better. And then I spent 20 months in Sudbury prison in Derbyshire. Sudbury prison was an open prison, so I was relatively lucky. But when I went in, I was a mess. That was me. Too many minstrels, too much brandy, too much depression, 19 stone when I went in. Now, I know I'm not necessarily as thin as a rake now, but I was a big boy back then. I was a complete mess. And once you get your head around the reality of prison, which took me about 3 months to do realistically, it was horrible. I was missing my kids, I was missing my family, my head was just screwed. It took me about 3 months, but after I got my head around it and thought, well, you've got 2 years of this, so you better get used to it. I thought, well, what am I going to do? So what I did is I started getting fit. Now, I'm a man I used to be that lazy, I used to take my dogs for a walk using a quad bike. That's how lazy I was. So the idea of running was never entered my head before. I started trying to jog a kilometre. I had to stop 4 times. I ran a mile, stopped twice. And I got up to where I was running 25 miles a week. I lost 50 pounds in a year. I was in the best shape of my life because I got nothing else to do. What am I going to do? And I said, right, what am I going to start learning? So I started learning about more marketing techniques online. I was planning my next future. And towards the end of it, my prison cell looked like a library. I saved up to get a DVD player, got a DVD player, had some DVDs on different training courses sent in to me, and I started learning. So I was gearing myself up for freedom again. And it wasn't all bad. Anybody that says prison's easy either has completely the wrong type of life, in that there are some people that don't mind going into prison. I saw somebody that went in 4 times in the space of 20 months. But let's call them normal, for want of a better word, people that say, oh, prison's easy, it's PlayStations, it's this, it's meals a day. Let me tell you, go and spend a week in there and see. It's a whole other world. It's a whole other level of mentality. It's horrible. It's a horrible place. 2 days would have been enough for me to teach me never to want to go back in there, let alone 2 years. It was horrendous. But like I said, it wasn't all bad. And people think differently. There's a paranoia in prison. And I didn't fit the normal prisoner criminal profile. Relatively well-spoken, never been in trouble before. I stuck out like a sore thumb. And rumours and paranoia take hold. And I got put on, the prison officers weren't particularly friendly people, some of them, and I got put onto the biggest drugs wing in the prison. And as soon as I knew I was getting put on there, all the rumours started. He's a plant, he's a this, he's a that. And the first night I got to Sudbury prison, one of my co-defendants who got sentenced with me had moved there about a month before and had got in the same cell as a man called Stuart, otherwise known as Stan. And Stuart was back then, not now, he's been 10 years of no trouble at all and very admirable it is, but back then he was a pretty serious criminal. He was doing a 14-year sentence for cannabis on a large scale. And I was walking around the grounds of Sudbury Prison with Stan, and I got an instant friendship with him. And I built up a relationship. Stan taught me how to play chess, and I built this real solid friendship up with him. And when I found out that I was getting moved on to this particularly bad wing, Stan said, I think I better come with you. And I genuinely believe nothing happened to me because people knew I was with him. This is a picture of us in Great Yarmouth in 2010 when Stan finished his sentence, and we're still great friends now. So it wasn't all bad. I've got some friendships all these years on, 16 years on. So October 2009 comes. Freedom. This is going to be great. I mean, life's going to be great. I'm out of prison. It's going to be amazing. I've got no money. I'd got my old laptop and a mobile phone. What am I going to do? I'm living back at my parents'. You get £46 back then, you get that out too. I was lucky that I'd managed to get a use of a car, but I've got no money, a laptop and a mobile phone. And a friend of mine says, well, you've got to think on your feet. You've got to create something with what you've got. I was lucky that I got an Apple Mac computer, and on an Apple Mac computer, there's something called GarageBand. And he said, right, go and make some royalty-free music tracks using GarageBand and put them on the internet for sale. Spent 3 days doing it. It made $4,000, and that was my start back again. So I was doing things like that. I was getting back on. I was improving. I'd made a plan in my head to, when I went into prison, I looked like an OAP with bags of pills, anti-IBS, anti-this, anti-depression, anti-everything. And I'd made a pledge in my head when I got out, I wanted to leave with no pills at all, which I did. But 3 months later, this freedom and this life is going to be great wears a little bit thin because you've got no money. It's a damn struggle again. You invent in your head what things are going to be like. And don't get me wrong, it was great to be free. It was great to be back with my family, but it wasn't all I'd cracked it up to be in that 2 years. So I had to actually go back on antidepressants 3 months in just to be able to keep going. So I had a call with my friend called Brad Goss in Canada. I was doing all right. I was paying my will. I've moved back to Ashby. I got a little terraced house in Ashby. I was paying the rent. I was back on track. And then my friend Brad called me up from Canada and he said, have you heard this thing called Bitcoin? Like, I've spoke to 6 people about it. Nobody's interested. I thought I'd call you because if anybody's going to be interested, it's going to be you. We had a 45-minute conversation about it and I was hooked. I'm anti-establishment and the idea that governments can just print money if they run out of it. I'm not going to bore you about crypto, but crypto changed the course of my life for the next 8 years. I spent 2 years of hard work. I spoke all around the world about crypto. This was me in Manchester. I've spoken in Japan, in St. Martin in the Caribbean, and I was all in on this. I bought my very first Bitcoin for £100. So did James. My son James bought his for £100, but James sold it for £200 thinking he'd done all right. It's currently worth about £50,000. So I was entrenched. And then I had the idea of setting up my own crypto called Banks. It was a nice play on word. I wasn't particularly a fan of normal banks, so I went with an X and called it Banks. But timing is everything. And I've always been a little bit too early on my vision of things. Back in the day, with video will be the next big thing instead of pictures. It's a little bit too early. And this was 2015. I'd put my all into banks as a thing. We were going to have our own exchange. It was going to be our own currency. And this was 2 years before the first big Bitcoin price hike. And it failed in short, because it was just too early. It was too ambitious, 2 years too early. Now, ironically, in 2017, that's when things started shooting up for the first time. But in February 2017, it was hard times again. On the 23rd of February 2017, I was suicidal without even knowing it. Nothing had working again. I found myself down the back, if anybody knows Wilsley Golf Course, found myself down the back of Wilsley Golf Course in my car with hose pipe, gaffer tape, big bottle of Jack Daniels and a load of pills. I had no idea how I got there. Not a clue. It was only a few days later I started remembering how I got there. Fortunately, that's where I snapped out of whatever I snapped out of. That's how bad I got. So my friends and family gathered round me and said, it's time for new beginnings again. And I was living at my friend's house, renting at the time. They said, look, you can't afford this. Stop. Start again properly. Lower all your bills, stop all the pressure, and start again. So I did. And in March, I bought a static caravan. I had a lovely place to live. My friend said, go and put it up in that field overlooking 10 acres. And I lived in that caravan from March 2007. And I have to tell you, it was one of the happiest, most contented times of my life. It was genuinely amazing. It took me a bit of getting used to. I'm living in a caravan, I'm a failure, I'm this, I'm that. But actually, once I put my log burner in the lounge and I'd got all my own furniture in there, I loved that place. It was great. And I'd started, this was back when people couldn't buy cryptos easily now. Now it's a lot different and what have you. But back then, to buy Bitcoin or what have you was really hard. So I started brokering it on websites called localbitcoins.com. And I was just a broker. I literally bought it at this price, sold it for a percentage more. And no word of a lie, from March when I moved into that caravan, come December, when Bitcoin hit its first all-time high of $17,000, my life turned around again. I brokered over 10 million pounds worth of Bitcoin sitting out of that caravan. And I was back to being all right again. But one thing was missing. I'd not got a woman. I'd not got a partner. I was sitting there, I was quite happy with my 2 dogs and sitting in my caravan, and I was doing my brokering, but that one thing was missing. And in 2017, I had 22 dates with 22 women. Some of them didn't like me. I didn't like some of them. Some of them were on the wrong path for each other. Just 22 dates in 9 months. But date 23, and by this point, I was giving up. I'm like, I can't be arsed. I even said to the dog, I mean, I've started talking to the dog properly at this point, so you know things are tough. I'd said to the dog on this particular night, I don't know if I can be bothered to go to Stoke-on-Trent, which was halfway to where Gabby lived. I'd rather just have a glass of wine, I think. But I went. And Gabby was at exactly the same stage in her dating as well. Date 23, I met Gabby. And we've been together since. And we got on that well on our first date that actually the waitress at the end, when I went to pay the bill, said, oh, are you celebrating something special? I said, no, it's our first date. And it's 7 years in September since we've been together. She's occasionally got a vile temper. She's Romanian. But she is genuinely the most supportive woman and loving woman I've ever been with. So it all had turned around. And life can turn around in an instant. I'm living proof of it with all the ups and downs. So, my passions are my dogs. I love my dogs. I love music. Music is a massive part of my life. I've been to so many concerts, more than I can remember. And I love my pigeons. I love has anybody seen The Gentleman on Netflix? Well, yeah, you've seen it. So you should watch The Gentleman. The Gentleman on Netflix. What's the actor's name called? Winston. Ray Winston. It plays a character. And there's a 90-second clip about why he loves pigeons. Now, ironically, he's sitting in prison at the time. He's giving this little monologue. But they have a pigeon loft in the prison. And he gives a speech. I'm not going to try and repeat it, about why he loves pigeons so much. But what people don't realise is pigeons saved hundreds of lives in the wars. One pigeon called Sharia Moore has got a medal for the hundreds of lives she saved because she managed to fly out of enemy territory and go back and tell people where the troops were. So yeah, I love the pigeons, and I've been lucky to be able to travel around the world. I've been to China regarding pigeons. I've been to my very first trip abroad ever was to San Diego, California, when I was 17 on my own about pigeons. I am going to Portugal, all about pigeons. But that's one of my passions. And I love to travel, and I've managed to combine the two. And I love to try and help people with all the life experiences I've learned, because I've been lucky. I'm here. I haven't had any physical ill health. But I pretty much have had anything else you can think of happen. Divorce, bankruptcy, name it. I've been through it. So I like to be able to think that I can help people with those life experiences. And now approaching 50, it seems a long time ago, that stuff. So half of my life I've lived through the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur. So the here and now, I'm still on the happy pills. I don't mind saying that. I've got a major thing in me that says certainly men should talk about it more. I had a doctor back in 2006 say, if any one of these things that have happened to you, you'd probably be all right, but everybody has their limits, and 3 things of significance have happened to you in the last few months. You've got your limit, and there you go. I'm still on them, and I've resisted the idea of wanting to come off them, because for now I'm all right. I have 1 in 30 days that I might feel a bit low. I don't feel depressed, I just feel a bit low. I don't know what I'd be like without the tablets, but I'm convinced we need to talk about it more, because the more we do, the better we'll all be. And I've genuinely got a new passion for life. I've got 2 businesses now. I've got an AI for software business. I had a talk here a few weeks ago about it. AI is going to change the world as we know it. It's going to be bigger than the internet. It probably is going to be bigger than electricity, like it or not. And with AI, the creator of ChatGPT, which is OpenAI, one of the biggest AI companies out there, said himself, it's either the best thing since electricity or it's the equivalent of the nuclear bomb. It's up to us as humans to decide which it is. So I spotted, again, a market, but I deliberately held back on getting into AI because I know what I'm like, and in my mind, I was like, don't get in too early, don't get in too early. And I only have been into that now for a year. But it's going very well, and they're my business partners. And then I have Real Entrepreneur. And for 10 years, I've been wanting to say to myself, what would I want if I was starting again? What resources and training and education and experts to be able to meet would I want if I was starting again? And that's what Real Entrepreneur is about: real people, real business, and real life. And they're my 2 businesses that I'm genuinely wake up in the morning excited to be involved in. Very different from my past, but I genuinely believe everything that I've been through has brought me to where I'm at now. And that life experience and all of the screw-ups that I've done, I can help people less experienced or younger than me do. One other passion I've now got is that I want to be based in Portugal at least half the time within 2 years. Probably 75% of the time, because I hate the weather. I miss the Bahamas weather, and I'd like 300 days of sun. So here's a few thoughts to finish off. There's actually quite a few thoughts here, but I'll run through as many as I can. Mental health and depression, always talk about it. Please. I know way too many people that took their own lives personally. You see them in the news all the time. And I hate to think how many people could have been saved by just being talked to. Live in the moment, not the past. Hardest thing in the world to do. The amount of times that I have lived in the past and kicked myself don't get you anywhere. Yeah, you might need a day or two if you've made a mistake or you've screwed up of wallowing about it, but move on, because it doesn't get you anywhere at all. Enjoy your freedom. I genuinely believe people that haven't experienced what I've experienced sometimes don't just appreciate their freedom. Anytime I have fish and chips now, or a KFC, I think of that time of my life. Because the very first thing I did when I got out was get fish and chips. And the KFC is that a friend of mine who used to be able to work out during the week on a Friday night smuggled a big bucket of KFC back into prison, which was completely the wrong thing to do, and he got in real trouble if he'd have done it. But I can remember one Friday night having KFC in my prison cell, and it was the best chicken I've ever tasted in my life. So I appreciate the small things now, and all these years on, I haven't forgot that experience. I think that's what's powerful. And never let anybody tell you you can't do something. Yes, you've got to be realistic. Am I going to be the next fat Matt Damon? Maybe. But never let anybody tell you you can't do something. Because the only thing between you getting where you want to be is you. Ignore what other people think. Take advice, but don't let naysayers put you down. And keep things simple as well. I definitely overcomplicate stuff. Keep things simple. I way overcomplicate stuff. If you keep them simple, simplest things work the best. And never chase losses. I have got into some major, major problems chasing losses. I can put that back to 2001. Oh, I've spent all this money now to keep going. I'll spend more. Don't do it. Never chase losses. Take the hit, move on. Never have all your eggs in one basket. Diversify. And if you're having a bad day, tomorrow is a new day. And know it. Find a mentor. If you're in business, find a mentor. It's one of the best things you can do. I haven't actually had a mentor since Harry. But if it wasn't for Harry, and I believe actually with Harry, if he'd have carried on living longer, I wouldn't have done half of the stupid things I did. I wouldn't have put all my eggs into one basket. I wouldn't have used all my money to go and do what I did back when I was living in the Bahamas. I think he would have steered me in the right track. But it is what it is. And being an entrepreneur is tough sometimes. The trouble now, especially with people in their teenage years and their 20s, they see Instagram and they see TikTok and they see this. And when I was their age, when I was my kids' age, people wanted to be a footballer. I never did, but a lot of people wanted to be a footballer or a sports person or what have you. Now, people want to be entrepreneurs. They see the supermodels and the yachts and the fancy beaches and the hotels, and they think that's what being an entrepreneur is like. And we all know it isn't. And that's a big issue. So it's tough. Keep your overheads low. The biggest killer of any business is having too many overheads. Because those bad times, especially now, can really screw you if you're not careful. Appreciate the small things like I've talked about. And banks are not your friend. That's me in NatWest in Ashby when I was running my Bitcoin brokering business. That's police cards outside of NatWest in Ashby. Those police cars were there for me because I refused to leave because they froze all my bank accounts and they refused to tell me why. And I had over £120,000 in my business account at the time. It wasn't all my money either. And I had about £5,000 in my personal account, and they froze them, and they never told me why. So I went. I was actually Facebook live streaming it from within NatWest at the time. I got people from all around the world tuning in. And they called the police, and the police made me leave. 4 days later, still heard nothing. It crippled my business. All I was doing was brokering Bitcoin, nothing illegal. I'd got all the ID and all the paperwork you need for the clients I was dealing with. And they would not tell me why they'd frozen it. 4 days later, I went back. They called police on me again. Banks are not your friend. And your goal must be to try and be happy, because success is finding happiness and contentment. All those years ago, I thought success was big yachts like the Budweiser family that used to keep their yacht on the island was, and massive mansions. Don't get me wrong, I'd still plan to live in Portugal in a nice house one day. But money is not what success is. It genuinely is finding contentment and happiness. And think about what success really means to you, is what I would say. Because that, for me, has changed a lot in the last 20 years. Think about your end goal. Where do you want to be in life? Paint your own picture and figure out the way of getting there. Haters will always hate. I have had my fair share of haters like you would never imagine. Everybody from people threatening to kill my dogs to all kinds of things that I can't even say unbelievable. But haters will always hate. And if you stand up and you stand up to bullies, you're always going to get problems. So just accept that haters will always hate you and move on. You'll never make all the right decisions either, ever. We're all human. And in business, turnover's vanity, profit's sanity. You hear a lot of people talk about, oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. Well, how much have you actually made? Again, it's that showing off mentality. And if you hate Monday mornings, change your life. Because I don't know one day for another. Somebody said to me, oh, it's Bank Holiday Monday. Completely forgot. Makes no difference. If you hate Monday mornings, change your life. Because I don't hate Monday mornings. I don't even really know. The only difference between a weekend and now is when on a Saturday morning I have to clean out my pigeons. That's it. That's the only difference for a weekend. And timing really is everything. The biggest mistakes I've made in my life come down to timing. I was too early normally. I've never been too late. I was just too early. If I'd have launched that crypto company in 2017, I would be in a whole different place now because people were launching stuff that was genuinely terrible and everything blew up in a good way. And be careful of the negative monkey. I got two monkeys, one on each shoulder. Good monkey, bad monkey. I like to think the happy pills keep the good monkey more vocal than the bad one. But sometimes the bad monkey will creep in. Be careful of the negative monkey because he will screw you up if you're not careful. That voice in your head, you're not good enough, or this is going wrong, or why aren't you doing this, or you could have done that better, or don't bother doing it, you'll waste your time. Be careful of the negative monkey. And be realistic with your worst case scenarios because too many times I've said, oh, it can't get any worse. Can't get any worse than this, and it always does, or can always do anyway. Excuse the language on this one, but there are souls everywhere. There really are. I think the older I get, the more I see them. And there seems to be more people that will screw you over. Money is just a tool. I learned this quite a while ago now. Money is just a tool. That's all it should be. It shouldn't be viewed as anything else. And everything happens for a reason. Now, some of them reasons I'm still searching for, but I genuinely do believe everything does happen for a reason. And certainly from a business point of view, think bigger. I think we as a British race, we're not like the Americans. The Americans think big. Yeah, they talk big and they shout big, perhaps, some of them, but we don't think big enough. Because what's the saying? If you shoot for the stars, maybe you'll hit the moon anyway. Well, that'll be good enough for me. So think bigger. And yeah, money doesn't buy happiness, but I've been rich and I'm poor, and I'm rich is better. And don't waste your life just existing. Easier said than done in these times. But what's the point of existing? I know too many people that have died suddenly or have got this and have got that. It's a big wake-up call. So don't waste your life just existing. And focus on the vision. If you're in business, focus on the vision like I'm now. Genuinely wake up and go to bed thinking about what I'm doing. It's the first time I've been so passionate in a long time about things. And if I focus on that, I know other things will happen. And action is everything. Ideas are easy, but it's implementing them that's the key. And it's having that capacity and that fortitude to implement whatever ideas you've got. And success is not final. Failure is not fatal. And it's the courage to continue that gets you where you want to be and counts. And don't let stress cloud your judgments. The worst decisions I've ever made in my life was because I was stressed. What kind of stupid idea was it to get a warehouse in Leicester and grow some plants? I mean, how stupid, that was stress. Actually, if I'd have gone and done something else that my friends were doing at the time, I'd have been a lot more successful, completely legal, and never had these problems. But stress and that single-mindedness of, well, I can't do anything else, gets in your way. And take time to think as well. I think certainly for me, I haven't in the past took time to think. If you take time to think, it's a great thing to get you what I call blue sky thinking and thinking outside of the box. And ultimately, be real. And life is one game, really, at the end of the day. We don't know how long we've got, and treat it as a game. And probably one of the most important things now is keep going and never give up. Because I'm living proof that you can get through pretty much anything, despite all the bad decisions and the ups and downs of life. It's been a ride. Thank you very much.